how's it going? Matthew Bailey Media here, and welcome to another tier list video. Now, in this tier list video, it's going to be a little different, because even though it's not technically the first half of the decade being over yet, I thought I should do a tier list where I rank every single original streaming show that's come out since the pandemic year, so 2020 until 2024. Now, this is an updated one, because I was going to do it before I saw the show Avatar the Last Airbender, but unfortunately I saw it, so I figured I'd add that to this list. So if y'all like this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a comment as to what other tier list videos you think I should do that I haven't done already. And as always, let's get into this tier list. Okay, everybody, so here we are. We are now going to be ranking the 28 different TV series and shows that I watched post-pandemic that have been released. You know, everything from Marvel shows to Star Wars shows, and even some non-Star Wars and Marvel shows that I watched. And we're going to discuss what my thoughts were on each of them relatively quickly. Now, some of these shows do have like multiple seasons, so I'm going to just gather them all up as one when it comes to rating the show on my tier list. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the first show we got is the most recent show that I've watched, that being Avatar the Last Airbender on Netflix. Now, like I said, if y'all saw my review of the Avatar show a few videos ago, this show I thought was a way better adaptation than the M. Night Shyamalan disaster we got over 14 years ago in 2010. But, I mean, like I said, there were some things that they did sort of take out of the original show. Some episodes, I get why they didn't try to adapt them. Some they tried to connect with each other. Some worked, and some I thought it could have been improved on, but I still thought it was a decent show. I mean, it was a way better adaptation, like I said, to M. Night Shyamalan's adaptation. So if I had to rank this show overall, I would probably put it in the A tier. It's a decent show, I gotta admit. And again, let's hope they do end up making season 2, because we haven't gotten into adaptation for that yet, so we'll figure it out. But next up, we've got WandaVision. This is the first Marvel show that actually came out from Marvel when they started doing Disney Plus shows. And honestly, it was a decent thing, I gotta say. I mean, I wasn't too big on sitcoms and stuff, but once it got away from the sitcoms, I think after the 4th episode a lot more, it started to tell a decent story. And again, with the way Avengers Endgame ended, with Wanda having to get so upset with Thanos and saying she killed her lover, being Vision, and then she somehow resurrected him. And we even get introduced to an adult version of Monica Rambeau, which I thought was interesting. Now, unfortunately, this was a good show, but unfortunately, with Monica's character, it didn't really matter when it came to the movie The Marvels, and that movie was not very good. Excuse me, but I gotta say, WandaVision I thought was an okay show. I mean, I'll definitely put it in maybe the B category. Because, like I said, it's an okay show. It was definitely like one of the better shows that out of the Marvel stuff, but it's not the best one. We'll get to those in a little bit. But the next show we have on here is the revival to iCarly. You can't really see the title of the show on here, but this is for iCarly. Now, they only did 3 seasons of this revival, which I found a little disappointing, because they left us on a really big cliffhanger. Slight spoilers for some of these shows, but with iCarly, the biggest cliffhanger they left us on was in season 3, the last season, where they make it seem like Carly and Freddie be thinking about getting married, and then out of nowhere she looks off screen and sees somebody in the room, and it turns out to be her mother, who we never actually got referenced in the original show. And then when it's suddenly revealed that she's there, and after they're thinking about getting married to each other, which was a huge thing in the original show. Freddie had such a huge crush on Carly throughout the original show, and then they brought them back in the revival, and now that they were considering getting married, and then out of nowhere her mother shows up. I mean, they did kind of reference that whole thing about her mother not showing up in iCarly during the events of Sam and Cat, another show that came out where we saw Neville get reunited with Sam. Again, kudos to Jeanette McCurdy for not coming back for this show. I understand why she didn't want to come back, but still, in her Sam and Cat spinoff, Neville asked her, how come we never heard anything about Carly's mother? They finally brought that in as a possibility during the revival, and then we see her off screen, but then out of nowhere, they just stopped the series. And I was not very happy about that. But when it comes to the overall seasons, I thought it was a really cool thing they did, reviving this whole show, showing different bits of it, and I gotta say, it was definitely a solid watch. In fact, I'm probably gonna put it just above WandaVision in the B category. It was definitely an entertaining watch. Next up, we have Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Now, Falcon and the Winter Soldier is the next Marvel show that we got from Marvel, and I gotta say, this one is probably the one show that I thought was interesting, to say the least, from the Marvel stuff. I will say I did not think it was as good as WandaVision, but I still relatively enjoyed it. And I like how they did certain character plot holes in this show, and this is supposed to lead into Captain America: Brave New World, which comes out next year, so keep an eye out for my review on that when I do that next year. But with this show, I thought it was interesting to get introduced to certain characters. We got introduced to characters like Valentina de Fontaine, or whatever her name is, and we find out in Black Panther: Wakanda Forever that she's the director of the CIA. So that's an interesting plot twist. Then we get introduced back to Sharon Carter, who it turns out is the Power Broker, who is a known character, I think, in the comics. Which I'm curious to find out why she suddenly turned against her fellow heroes. But like I said, I thought the show was almost as entertaining as WandaVision, so I'll put it in the B category right behind it. Next up, we have Goosebumps. Now, Goosebumps is the most recent show that came out on Disney Plus, technically. At least I think it is. As no, scratch that. That was Echo, which we will get to that later. But with Goosebumps, this is the Disney Plus adaptation of the show. Now, it has been greenlit for season 2, but when it comes to the first season, I kind of understood where it was going with the first 8 out of 10 episodes that they had, but I found it really weird once they finished the 8th episode. The 9th and 10th were just out of nowhere plot holes that came, and stories that came out of nowhere. Like, the first 8 episodes were overarching story with a bunch of characters, and I don't understand why they did what they did in the 9th and 10th episodes. I feel like if they hadn't used those last 2 episodes, I would have given this probably a B category rating. But because the last 2 episodes kind of threw it off of me, I'm probably going to put it in the C category. I mean, it was an okay show, but again, those last 2 episodes just completely threw me off. Don't understand why they did that. Okay, next up, we've got Percy Jackson and the Olympians. This is definitely the most recent Disney Plus show that came out, that just finished up its running. And let me just say, this is a way better adaptation for Percy Jackson than the 2 movies that came out. And I still don't know why certain people out there like Logan Cinematic Universe, well, again, his name is the anti-woke reviewer now, still hate it, but I'm curious what his thoughts are on season 2 being greenlit, and I know he's probably not happy about that. But anyways, with my thoughts on Percy Jackson, it was a way better adaptation, just like with Avatar the Last Airbender. Now, I will say, I actually do find this one better than than Avatar. I do think the Percy Jackson series was a much cooler adaptation, mainly because it didn't really have to cover that much storyline. unlike Avatar, where it had to cover like multiple episodes at once, this one was based off of a book, and which had around the same number of chapters. So I can see why I think this adaptation was a lot better than the Avatar show, because it was doing a lot more, like, it didn't have as much to work with in a way, and I think that's what saved it. Next up, we get to one of my first shows that will probably be one of my favorites, that being One Piece. Now, One Piece is based off of an anime show that I never watched the anime, but it wasn't until I saw the show that hearing so many good reviews over it, I thought, you know what, I'll watch this show. Even though I never watched the anime show first, I did end up watching some of the episodes after the ones that this one is adapting, and I gotta say, I'm really curious how they're gonna adapt season 2, because this show is like one of the first shows that will be on my S tier. It's like one of the best shows I've ever seen when it comes to adapting animated stuff like anime, especially, into live action. Now, you may find this shocking that a lot of my top 3 stuff are all adaptations of stuff like Avatar, Percy Jackson, One Piece. We're going to get to other stuff in a little bit, because I do have some stuff that will end up on the S tier besides One Piece. But now we're getting into Power Rangers Cosmic Fury, the 30th anniversary / 30th season of Power Rangers. That sort of celebrates 30 years of it. We get cameos from multiple different people from the past. The main villain of this season is, surprisingly, Lord Zed, who makes a surprise reappearance. And we find out he's actually been resurrected. And we even find out that this show actually takes place 2 years before the events of Power Rangers SPD, which was a show released in 2005. I was 6 years old when that show came out. But I didn't actually start watching Power Rangers until I was about 7 or 8 years old. So technically it was when, I think, Operation Overdrive. Actually, no, not Operation Overdrive. I think I actually started watching Power Rangers right around the time RPM and Samurai came out. So I think I was like 10 to 11 years old at that time. Pretty crazy stuff. But with Power Rangers Cosmic Fury, I love how they adapted it, even if it's only 10 episodes. I did like some of the stuff they did in it. Bringing back certain cameos, like I said, they brought back Lord Zed. They brought back Billy, the Mighty Morphin Blue Ranger. We even got to see Heckle from Dino Charge actually suit up as his comic book counterpart as Dark Ranger. We never actually know how he became the Dark Ranger, and how he even got to that dimension in the first place. But I thought it was a really crazy thing. And the way they ended it was really cool. So with Power Rangers Cosmic Fury, I gotta say, I'm probably gonna put it just above iCarly on the B category. I thought it was really a solid series. Again, not as good as some of these adaptations we have up here, but it was roughly okay. Next up, we have Andor. Andor is like one of those shows that, honestly, I was pretty surprised by how by the fact that this show takes place prior to the events of what is it called? The fact that this show takes place prior to the events of Rogue One. This is one of the few Star Wars shows that I actually relatively enjoyed. I mean, it's so good that, it's not as good as I was hoping for it to be, but I'm going to put it right here on the B category or in front of Cosmic Fury, because again, I really enjoyed it. There's only one Star Wars show that's on here that I actually really enjoyed, and we're going to get to that. But for now, let's move on to our next show, which is Loki. Now, there are 2 seasons of Loki, and I gotta say, I was really surprised at how well this show was received. It was like one of the few Marvel shows that actually is going to end up on my S tier. Do I like it more than One Piece? You know what? Actually, yeah, I like it more than One Piece. It was like one of the few shows that I really thought they should have led on when it came to the multiverse saga, which they did, and it seems like this is going to be an interesting take with the multiverse saga, which they are trying to fix, and hopefully they end up saving it by the end of the multiverse saga with Secret Wars. But anyways, let's move on to the next show, which is The Bad Batch. Now, this is the first animated Star Wars show that came out. Actually, I think this is the only one that came out from Star Wars that's animated. And I gotta say, this takes place after Revenge of the Sith and way before A New Hope. Now, it stars a group of stormtrooper clones who, I think they're called Batch 99, who are defective, and after they carry out Order 66, they don't know what's going on. And because they're defective, they try so hard to abandon the Empire. And we're currently in the middle of season 3 right now, and so far the first 4 episodes that I've watched as of this recording have been doing pretty interesting. I may redo this list once I see a little bit more shows that come out, so that I can do half the decade. But for now, we're going with what I've seen so far. And for right now, if I had to put this on the tier list, I would actually put it just above WandaVision and Falcon and Winter Soldier. I think it's a relatively solid show. Next up, we've got Hawkeye. Now, Hawkeye is the next Marvel show that honestly, I was kind of surprised by how much stuff was going on in this. But I gotta say, Hawkeye this is also the first time we actually legitimately get introduced to a certain villain who we will talk about in a later show. But with the way they did the passing of the torch, I think this may come as a shock, but I actually think this show deserves to be just above WandaVision. I thought it was a decent show, and it's based around the holidays, and I thought it was a pretty interesting thing. Now we're getting into some of the not-so-good shows. The first one being Secret Invasion. Now, I've never read the Secret Invasion comics, but based on what I've heard, this show did not honor that comic at all. This is one of the few shows that, honestly, I don't know what they were thinking about this, and I'm going to put it the first show in the F tier. I honestly don't know what they were trying to do with this. Next up, we've got What If. Now, this is another animated show, but this is the only animated show that's part of Marvel. We had The Bad Batch from Star Wars. Now we got the animated show What If. They've already released 2 seasons, and again, the first season I thought was an interesting storyline. The second season was weird how they decided to take it, but it seems like they do want to keep going with season 3. Not sure what they're going to do, but I guess they just wanted to put this as sort of a animated thing that isn't really considered canon, so to speak. But I gotta say, I think this was just a little bit. Actually, I think it's roughly around the same area as Goosebumps. I thought it was an okay show, something I just wanted to get past the time with. But now we're about to get into the next show, which I can tell you right, I'm not even going to talk too much about this. Heck, Velma, boom. One of the worst shows that has ever come out during this entire year. Or not year, but this entire first half of the decade. What were they thinking? Race swapping Velma. Now, again, some race swaps when it comes to certain characters, especially if it's a white character being race swapped by a black actor, I am totally okay with them doing that, just as long as they don't shove a bunch of identity politics dialogue and racist dialogue, sexist dialogue, whatever, that sort of follows the quote-unquote woke agenda in a way. that's the one thing I was not happy about with Velma, is not only did they race swap Velma, Shaggy, and Daphne, and the only character that was still white was Fred, but they butchered his character. All three characters of Shaggy, Velma, and Daphne were not only race swapped, but they had nothing but identity politics dialogue throughout all three of them. And they made the white character look so dumb in Fred, and that's why this is like one of the worst shows I've ever seen so far this year. Next up, we've got the Santa Clauses. So the Santa Clauses, I gotta say, is like one of the few shows that I must say is I loved the Santa Clauses movies when they came out. The 2 seasons, I thought the first season was really interesting because they were trying to make it seem like Santa couldn't do the job anymore. Tim Allen is back, obviously, and so is Elizabeth Mitchell, who played Mrs. Claus. And we even get to see what became of Buddy Claus. And weirdly enough, they even had 2 kids by the time of the show taking place. And their youngest daughter actually ends up being the real-life daughter of Tim Allen, which I thought was interesting. Again, the first season I thought was meh. Once it got to the second season, it makes me wonder what the future of the Santa Clauses is. Now, they did sort of shove a little bit of like identity woke agenda driven stuff in here, specifically with the female characters all getting all upset when they start talking about like men. Like in the first season, we get that one scene where Mrs. Claus and a new character called La Befana start talking about how he went to this Yuleverse that had all the Santas, talking about how they were all men, acting like there should have been a female Santa Claus or something. That kind of threw me off. And then it was the same situation with season 2 a little bit. But honestly, I thought it was an okay show. In fact, I actually think it just barely gets to the C category. So now we're about to go on to the next show. And the next show is I Woke Up a Vampire. Now, I Woke Up a Vampire is a Netflix show that, to me, I'm curious as to why they made this show. I mean, I don't know if it's based on something, but I thought it was a really weird show, so to speak. I didn't hate it, per se, but I didn't hate it so much to the point where I'm just barely going to put it at the bottom of the C category. It was a weird show, I must say. Next up, we've got Miss Marvel. Now, Miss Marvel is the next MCU show that came out, and just like with what happened in WandaVision, this is, I gotta say, I thought it was an interesting show. I mean, I forgot the name of the girl who plays Kamala Khan, but I will say she did an okay job in this show, and she definitely did seem to be enjoying herself in the Marvels, even though that movie tanked. But I will say it's not one of the worst Marvel shows. In fact, I think it's just barely above What If. I thought it was an okay show, if I'm being totally honest. Next up, we've got Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan Kenobi is, I think, one of the first shows from Star Wars that came out, not long after The Mandalorian. And it's supposed to take place 10 years after Revenge of the Sith. I'm not sure if this is right around the same time as the ending of The Bad Batch or not, but people thought this show was going to be an interesting take on what happened to Obi-Wan Kenobi after Anakin turned evil. And right before they meet again in A New Hope. Now, I think the reason why so many people were hating on this show was because of them suddenly putting a evil female character that used to be a youngling training to be a Jedi, and then they suddenly decided they wanted to join the side of the dark side just because they thought Anakin was like their idol or something. I don't know why they did that. And then they did sort of pay off the ending of Revenge of the Sith when they said Obi-Wan was going to talk to Qui-Gon, who did like a force field sort of ghost kind of thing. And we never actually see the conversation. We just see him actually pop up and say, come on, we have a lot to talk about. And that's the one thing I didn't understand. So, honestly, this is one of the few shows that I think, funny enough, I actually didn't think it was as interesting as I Woke Up a Vampire. Pretty crazy, right? Next up, we've got Echo, the most recent Marvel show to come out. That they dropped all the episodes at once. But I gotta say, the way they did this show where we see Kingpin somehow survive his shot to the face at the end of Hawkeye, and this was the first TVMA Marvel show that was on Disney Plus. But of course, the way they ended it, they kind of changed Echo's powers from the comics. Again, I never read the comics, but honestly, I don't know what happened there. But with Echo, this is probably one of the few shows that I will say, though, I did find it a little bit more entertaining than I Woke Up a Vampire or Obi-Wan Kenobi, so it still is roughly in the C category. Next up is She-Hulk. Now, I know a lot of people were hating on this show, especially after episode 3, with that one scene that we shall not be talking about, but I think aside from that, the way they did the rest of the episodes after 3, I mean, my favorite episode out of all of them was the very first episode that sort of introduced us to her powers, and of course episode 8, where we finally get to see Daredevil in the MCU. And we kind of saw him in Echo as well, but the way he showed up in She-Hulk in his one episode, I thought was a pretty decent try at doing his court scenes. Now, even though a lot of the episodes I didn't really appreciate, it was really just episodes 1 and 8 that I enjoyed. I'm going to put this roughly in the D tier. Again, it's not a bad show. I mean, there were some things I was enjoying, but not a lot. So now we move on to Ahsoka. I think Ahsoka was the most recent Star Wars show to come out in live action. And I don't know why. This is like one of the few times that I think this show could have been great, but of course they made it seem like anyone could use the Force and not just actual Jedi and stuff. And I really just don't understand what they were doing. And it seems like they were going to hint at a season 2, but I don't even know if we're going to get a season 2, if I'm being honest. But with this show, it was not... I will say it was definitely a little bit more entertaining than Obi-Wan Kenobi, but I still don't appreciate what they did on it. Next up, we've got the Book of Boba Fett. We got 2 more Star Wars shows, this and another one later on, but with the Book of Boba Fett, I don't get what the point of this one was. It's only like a 6-episode series, I believe, where it sort of takes place in between the events of stuff like The Mandalorian, and both that and The Mandalorian, which we're going to get to later, sort of take place roughly around the same time as each other. So I'm not entirely sure what happened there, but with the Book of Boba Fett, I think this is one of the few shows that I actually put in the D category. Not very fond of it, but it was still somewhat entertaining. Next up is Power Rangers Dino Fury. Dino Fury had 2 seasons, and it follows up the events of Power Rangers Cosmic Fury. And I gotta say, this was a decent show. I mean, heck, it was so entertaining that I think it fits just in the same category as Cosmic Fury, but just barely. I thought it was a decent show, if I'm being totally honest. Now we get to The Mandalorian, the most recent show that came out, and honestly, the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian were spot on, really good shows. Unfortunately, the 3rd season went downhill for it, and that's what kind of screwed it up. But if I rank it overall, I think it probably did better than even the Bad Batch, if I'm being honest. It was a really interesting show. Now we move on to Moon Knight. Moon Knight is the last Marvel show on this list, and I gotta say, Moon Knight is one of the few Marvel shows that came out that I think was relatively interesting. I didn't think it was A or S tier category, but I still think it was just at the top of B category. It's a pretty decent show, if I'm being honest. Not sure how they're going to use Moon Knight in the future, but we'll see. Next up, we have Harley Quinn. And I gotta say, Harley Quinn is one of those... This had 4 seasons, and it sort of took its own spin on the character of Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy and a few other characters. I will say, I kind of found the way they told each season's story relatively interesting. And I'm not sure if they're going to continue with season 5 at all, but with the way the 4 seasons went down, you may find this shocking, but I actually did find it just as entertaining as iCarly and all these other shows overall, which I thought was pretty crazy. Okay, guys, so I almost ended the video before I realized I forgot to add National Treasure: Edge of History. That's the last show I have on this tier list, and I gotta say, National Treasure: Edge of History was a pretty interesting show. I mean, it took place after the events of the first 2 movies. It even introduces us to a new character named Jess Valenzuela, who searches for the treasure, for the Pan American treasure, which is similar, which I think sort of ties into what happened during the events of National Treasure: Book of Secrets, where Ben's mother, Dr. Emily Gates, who knows a lot about Mesoamerican history, this sort of ties into that in a way. Now, I don't know if these characters are going to actually get brought into the 3rd National Treasure, which they're still trying to make eventually, but I mean, if I were them, I wouldn't be surprised if they waited until like 2027 or close to 2027 to actually release the 3rd movie, because that would make 20 years since the events of the show, and I gotta say, or since the events of the 2nd movie, and I gotta say, the way they did this show was pretty interesting. Now, is it top tier level shows? No, but I still think it was probably more entertaining than probably all of these shows combined. Again, I thought the National Treasure show was way better than some of these other C tier list categories. But anyways, so now with that out of the way, those are all my rankings for every single show that has come out since 2020. Now, if you're wondering why there's still one left at the bottom, if you can see it, I just realized it's the same thing for iCarly. I didn't realize I posted the same image twice. So basically, the only 2 shows that I really enjoyed, like the best shows out of all of them, have been Loki and One Piece. And then for the A category, we have Avatar the Last Airbender and Percy Jackson. Everything else in the B category I thought was really roughly enjoyable. C, I thought was okay and could have been improved. D was meh, and as you can tell, Velma and Secret Invasion were the 2 worst shows that I've ever seen. I don't know why they even tried to put those shows on there. But if you wanted to say what my top 5 shows were, out of all of them, we have, like I said, we have Loki, One Piece, Percy Jackson, Last Airbender, and of course Moon Knight. And if you wanted to do my top 5 worst, it's obviously Velma, Secret Invasion, She-Hulk, Book of Boba Fett, and Obi-Wan Kenobi. So we had 2 Star Wars shows, 2 MCU shows, and 1 non-Marvel or Star Wars show, that being Velma. So anyways, that's all for now in this tier list video. So next time you see me, I'll probably be doing a review on Dune Part 2. So as always, I will see all you guys in the next video.